Coming up on today's show, Marla, who uses they, them pronouns, is a white, queer, gender-defiant, neurofabulous therapist, educator, and author who has been practicing polyamory since 2005. They've been offering non-monogamy workshops and consultations in academic and professional settings as of 2009. Their therapy practice centers the experiences of 2S LGBTQIA+ and non-monogamy identities and relationships. In 2022, Marla introduced @PolyaMarla as an accessible, anti-oppressive, intersectional resource on social media. Most recently, Marla wrote a book, Non-Monogamy and Defying a Paradigm, about the impact of mononormativity on non-monogamous relationships. Welcome to Loving Without Boundaries, where we hear inspiring stories, share actionable advice, and talk about the challenges and the joys of ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. I'm your host, Kitty Chambliss. Welcome back to Loving Without Boundaries, where I am delighted to have a beautiful conversation with Marla, who recently wrote a book called Non-Monogamy and Defying a Paradigm, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in our interview. But Marla, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy day and being here, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure.
Yes, I'm excited. So I'd love it if you could introduce yourself to our listeners in your own words.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Marla. I use they, them pronouns. I am a therapist and educator and now author and, trainer and all the things. Focused in sort of relationships and healthy relationships with a specialization in non-monogamy. So I've been practicing polyamory for over 20 years. This is just, it sort of became, I was a facilitator first, and then I started doing, therapy work kind of made sense for me. And then it kind of all just sort of like came together. So definitely with a focus on sort of queer and 2S LGBTQIA+ communities. But like non-monogamy and healthy relationships is the gem.
I love it. I love it. And we can't have enough people in this space helping other folks in this space. So I really appreciate your journey, and I can't wait to hear more about it. So I'd love to start with what I call the light bulb moment question, which is, was there a moment or maybe a series of moments when you were growing up when you realized that you were a little bit different, than the average child or a person walking down the street, and you had maybe an epiphany or a light bulb moment? Does anything come to mind?
Honestly, like probably birth. I was a lot different my whole life. I was in a pretty homogenous community growing up, and I never felt like I fit in there. It's funny, this is in the book, and I only know this because I just recently recorded my own audio for the book, so I just had to reread the whole thing out loud. But I talk about how, I kind of felt like the ugly duckling growing up, and then like one day I was lucky enough to realize like, oh wait, I'm just a freaking swan, I was like, nice. I was just not a duckling, and so, I was always different. And even when I remember my mom talking to me when I was, as I was growing up, about how she always said, like, she used the word special, which is very kind, but she would say, like, I wasn't into sports. I wasn't a dancer. The only sport I was good at was swimming, and I screwed up my shoulders by the time I was 11 because I was swimming so hard. So my mom was saying, even when I was young, that like, she's like, anything you showed interest in, we just tried to foster, because I just like the options that were available were never quite right for me.
So you always, it sounds like, felt a little left of center.
Yeah, a little left, a little right, just like up, down, just not quite in the like, the peg in the hole. Was like, I was just never that kid. Like, yeah, and I always had a big mouth.
And I love in your bio how you describe yourself as gender defiant. I've never heard that before. And a neurofabulous therapist. I love that as well. When did you maybe come to the realization that you were queer or gender defiant? Like, does anything come to mind that might resonate with our listeners so that they also feel that it might be, they might see themselves in possibly your story?
Yeah. So they're all a little different. And what's fascinating is that if you look at research that's coming out now, actually, I always joke that the Venn diagram between like queer, neurodynamic, and polyamorous is kind of like a weird circle. There's actually a lot of research coming out now about sort of queerness and neurodynamics or neurodivergence, which is really interesting, right? And so, and I'm not going to get too deeply into that, but in terms of the gender stuff, so I identify as defiant of center. It's just kind of like where I land. Like defiant is one of the best ways to describe me in my life. And I think I've always been that way, which is also funny because, oppositional, like demand defiance, stuff like is actually associated with ADHD, right? And so it's funny that like in some ways, is it the neurofabulosity or is it because I've always been like that, right? And so I always asked why, and I was always like curious. But what's really interesting, I think probably the queerness came out first probably, and the gender stuff, I had no examples. So I'm a geriatric millennial, and the thing is that if you look at history, most of my would-be elders were lost in the HIV/AIDS crisis. Wow. All the people, right? Think about it, right? All the people who would have, not all, sorry, that's not fair, but so many of the people of the community who would have been the people I would have been looking up to at the clubs, right? Who I would have been learning from. And there were some of them, of course, that were still around for sure. But there was a whole generation of queers lost, right? This idea of they, them as a pronoun coming out like, oh, it's so brand new. Well, it's not so brand new. It's just there was a hiatus of like a good decade where people weren't talking about it. That's not what the focus of our communities was on. So, I have memories of, I used to dress, and I mean, some of it was like I was a fat kid and I didn't fit into a lot of like girls' clothes, quote unquote girls' clothes. And so I wore a lot of clothes out of the men and the boys section, right? That's what was available to me. But it's also, is it the chicken or the egg? Like, it's also what I was drawn to, right? So, but at that time, I wasn't thinking about, I used to say, like, I don't cry, I'm not a girl, right? I never wanted to be a boy, but I had this sense that, like, my gender was different, right? But it was the language that, I was able to access really came to me much later in my life. And it's really only in the last, I changed my pronouns, I want to say in the last like 4 years, like officially, like I teetered on the like they, them, she, her. And then like, I mean, it was a pretty intense story where I got heavily trolled on the internet. Oh, wow. And that is how I ended up. Yeah, it was pretty interesting, like trial by fire, but that's actually what got me to just change full on they, them. So I thanked my trolls.
Wow.
So yeah. So I think that's where so like I'm 38 now. So it's really only been, like I said, about 4 years, but I've been questioning my gender, I think in some ways my whole life, because I didn't necessarily do the things that girls did always. And in terms of the neurofabulosity, man, realizing that people with ADHD have many similar experiences to me was so wild to realize, like, oh, all these things that I thought were just like Marla shticks are actually part of something that other people can relate to as well. So that was an interesting, also in the last couple of years, sort of like learning. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the question there. I think I may have answered it. Oh, and the queer part, I think I was 14 when I saw the movie Chasing Amy by Kevin Smith. Not saying it's perfect by any means, but there is a part where the lead character says that there was a moment where she realized that there's so much, I'm paraphrasing loosely, but that there's, so much hate in the world. And like, why would I cut myself off from the potential of loving half of the population because of their gender? And it was like a light bulb went off over my head where I was like, oh my God, of course I like could love anyone regardless of gender.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, I also love that movie. It was definitely like one of those coming of age movies that really spoke to me. So thank you for reminding me even of it. And then one question I didn't ask yet was how about your non-monogamy identity or leaning into that aspect? Did that simply overlap for you?
So I mean, I think that I grew up, like I said, in a community that was pretty normative in so many ways. And I mean, it was just like a riot because here's a book largely talking about mononormativity. But I grew up in a fairly normative society or like community. And so I didn't have a lot of the options or the language like I was talking about. But what was interesting is when I was 17, I had the good fortune of being exposed to polyamory. And that was by just plain old-fashioned luck that one of my best friends was taking a class. We were living in Montreal, Canada at the time, Montreal, Quebec. She was taking a class with a teacher who was an absolute rebel rouser. He would just like drop a random topic on the class and just watch people go. I don't even know what the class was about. I don't know. I know this, by the way, because I audited his class. I didn't take it. I wasn't registered, but the next semester I just went to his class for fun. But he was polyamorous. He was polyamorous. He had a huge family, many adopted kids, all kinds of things. And this friend would come out of class and be like, she was so enamored by like, oh my God, polyamory and what it's all about and blah, 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 polyamory. And again, this was 2004. So I was 17. And at the time, I was in a hot and heavy 2-month relationship with my boyfriend at the time. And I was like, she was really pushing it. Like, oh, non-monogamy, da-da-da. And I was like, listen, I totally get it. It sounds great. And I just have eyes for this dumbass. He did prove to be a dumbass, which actually leads to the answer, which is he broke up with me after our hot and heavy 2-month romance. And I found out probably close to a year later that in fact, he was dating someone. I was the other person. So the whole time we had been together for that big 2 months, right? When I was 17, he had been dating someone else. And when I found out, my reaction wasn't like, oh my God, how could you sleep with two of us? Or like, it was nothing about monogamy. It was the deception. I was like, if you would have, I did tell him off many years later, but the feeling was, if you would have just talked to me, like if you wanted to sleep with other people or you wanted to have multiple partnerships, talk to me. And this is me at like, again, 17 having these thoughts, but I was like, but don't freaking lie to me. Like, don't leave me like out to lunch and like mistreat me. And that was it. My next relationship after all of this happened was with the partner that I am still in partnership with. He's somewhere in the home where I'm sitting. And that was non-monogamous from the start.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, we were 18. So 20
that's
years ago.
Really remarkable. I know you said you're 38 now. What's interesting is I learned the word polyamory when I was roughly your age. I'm about to turn 56, so I'm a generation above you. And it was roughly around 2004 or 2005. So we both kind of entered that world at the same time. It's just that I'm 20 years your senior. But so that's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So something was waking up at that time, I guess. And like the evolution of where it's come in the last 20 years is like,
it's true.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's
just
true.
been
Because at that
so
same
wild.
time, there wasn't that many books out there. There was The Ethical Slut. I don't remember what else was out at the time, but not that much. And I've authored a book in 2017. Now you're authoring a book. Like, it's just magical how many resources are out there now.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
also for us to meet and have this conversation. So cool.
Truly. I mean, like, at the time when I learned about polyamory, my email address was I_R_booby@hotmail.com. Like, that was literally like, I can't make that up. I've long let go of that one. But it's one of those things that I'm like, I would like, social media wasn't even a dream. I think I had a cell phone because my parents muscled me into having one because I got my driver's license and they were worried. And so I had my grandmother's old brick cell phone. Like, I couldn't look things up in the palm of my hand. Like, was I going to go to like a library and like go through the cards to try to find something about, we were making it up as we went.
Yeah,
Like,
it's true.
there's so much more available now.
Mhm.
And like, the mistakes that I have made that I so happily share with everyone else, so hopefully they don't make them.
Right. Well, and that brings me to the next question, which is, what are some of the challenges that you had, whatever you're willing to share, a mistake or possibly that you made that you learned from that, and how did you overcome that? Anything come to mind?
I think I said chronologically, like I had a thought that I'm like, you know what, I'm going to say this one because it was the first biggest mistake I made in non-monogamy, which was making promises about the way I would feel in the future.
Mm.
So I didn't even know I had done this, but it was about 5 years into our non-monogamous relationship, myself and my partner, and there had been many other partners in that time. But I met someone and we fell in love, like real, like hard and heavy, like 22-year-old in love. And I remember seeing, my partner who I'd been with first struggling so hard with it, right? And we had never had those kinds of struggles before. And maybe it's worth noting, TLDR, that the new partner actually performed the wedding ceremony at our wedding many years later, and we're still great friends,
Wow.
even though we haven't been partners in many, many years. So I just wanted to,
That's fascinating.
there's happy story in this. There's happy story.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, something that my first partner, his name's Adam. I'm just going to say his name's Adam. Something that Adam said to me was, one of the upsets was, he said, you said that you would always love many people, but that you would never be in love, or that you'd only be in love with me. Now, did I remember saying this? No. Did I believe I had said it? 100%. Was that a commitment I could ever have really made? The answer is no. Quick TLDR, no. To make agreements today about the feelings I'm going to have in, 3 weeks, 3 years, whatever, like, that I'm not going to catch feelings. And that's one of the biggest struggles I have sometimes when people have agreements around that, because I saw the damage that it caused. This idea that, like, don't worry, like, I'm never going to be in love with anyone else. And we did a lot of work. Our little 22-year-old's hearts recovered. But yeah, that's making promises about the way I'm going to feel in the future, would not recommend.
Yeah, that's a big one, and I appreciate you vulnerably sharing that. Any other one that you want to share here? Anything come to mind?
For me, something that I noticed was, it's really easy to marginalize certain feelings, to tell ourselves, to marginalize them, to dismiss them. So, for example, I was 13 years deep in this relationship with the same first person I was talking about when he fell in love with someone new. And that was the first time. There have been 13 years of other relationships along the way, lots of loving, lots of all the things. We got over the love, whatever, that's fine. But the way that this one hit, it was the first time, 13 years it took me to feel the kind of jealousy that dysregulated my nervous system, that completely had me out of sorts, that had me reeling in this space of jealousy, which I've done if my therapy could tell you, the therapist could tell you the number of dollars that went to that whole scenario. It was a lot of dollars. A lot of therapy dollars were spent. But thankfully, a lot of growth was had. But I realized as part of that process of healing through that at this time, I was already a non-monogamy educator. I was in school to become a therapist at the time. I had this idea. I'd been at this for so long. And there was this part of me that was like, Marla, you signed up for this, right? You signed up for this kind of life. Like, just deal with it. Like, you're not allowed to feel X, Y, Z. In this case, maybe it was jealousy. It was also surprising to me. I'd let myself believe I, quote, wasn't a jealous person. Like, that's not a thing. Jealousy is a feeling. It's not a personality type. And it's a series of feelings, let's be honest. But I think that was the thing for me, is like realizing that I had to stop marginalizing the feelings. I had to stop abandoning myself in this distress, to acknowledge it, to then also be able to talk about accountability, not just for myself, but also what were some things that were happening in my partnership that were actually causing some of these feelings, right? It was like a whole mixed up yarn ball of realities, but I needed to start by acknowledging that it was okay to feel the way I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful one. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of our listeners, and including myself, can really resonate with that and relate to that. So, and especially even as an educator, like, whoa, what the heck? I'm not supposed to feel these, and potentially beating ourselves up. So I really love that you went on that growth journey and just leaned into it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, this idea that like anyone is above hard feelings, right? Whether it's, some people are like, well, I'm non-monogamous, therefore I don't feel those feelings. And I'm like, no. But then also, right, for the step up, right? People who do this education work, and I've had the privilege of working with other educators, right, in my therapy practice, and then also as peers. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. Like giving ourselves permission to be human.
100%. 100%. I definitely say that to a lot of my own clients as well. So I really appreciate you telling more of your story and the work that you're doing. So that brings me to your book. So Non-Monogamy and Defying a Paradigm. Like, what was the spark to write that book? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, like I said, defying to the center. And so I actually had to talk with the publishers because they wanted to call it. So it's part of the series, right? So it's part of the more than two, the word that I can't think of, but the Meow Meow series. But it's the accoutrements, and like different authors have been given the opportunity to write these kind of mini books to go with this much larger book, more than two, right? And so for me, what's fascinating is they were going to call it Non-Monogamy and Mononormativity. And I was like, can we just maybe, because I'm not just talking about mononormativity, because when you start talking about one, it opens into okay, but we're also talking about couples privilege, and we're also talking about there were so many other paradigms that overlap, right? And so I just got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. I gave a workshop about mononormativity at a conference, and I just happened to be in the right place in the right time. I reached out to someone named Eve. I had no idea who this person was. We had sat in a workshop together, and when you just click with someone in a workshop, and not because we chatted, but I was like, that person's brains, I have questions for them. This workshop was not about any of this stuff. The workshop was about something completely different, but I found this person and reached out to them, and I was like, hey, would you mind connecting? Do you have the capacity? Because I really want to actually ask you more about what you had to say as another participant in that workshop. Wow. And then we sit down and we're chatting, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Eve is one of the authors of More Than Two, which is a very big deal book, and owns a publishing house. And suddenly, before we were done, this conversation has invited me to give a workshop about, not a workshop, write a book about the workshop topic that I had just talked about. So it was like good luck and magic, but also I literally have a microphone tattooed on my hand. I can talk about anything. Like I love talking about this stuff, especially this stuff. So yeah, it was such a gift to be able to write a whole mini book about it.
That is so awesome. Yeah, and that is a wonderful opportunity. And I love the synergy. And I also got to meet Eve several times. She's been on the podcast, but I also got to meet her at a conference at Southwest Love Fest right before the pandemic.
Was the conference.
Was it? What year? Do you remember?
Yeah. It was not that I was supposed to go this year, and I actually had to cancel, unfortunately, because traveling, as I mentioned, to the US is not great for me.
Yes.
But I was going to be I ended up speaking, but just I did a live stream this year. And so it would have been last year, 2024. It was the first one after the pandemic.
Ah, yeah. So I went to the one before. So it was 2019, which is when I got to meet Eve. So yeah, we're like dancing around each other's worlds, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. What a wild world. What a wild world.
So who would you say that book is for? Like who is like your target audience? Who do you think it would help for your book, Non-Monogamy and Defying a Paradigm?
Yeah. Ideally, this book is for anyone who wants to understand the way that we engage in relationships in the world better. Obviously, yes, for anybody who's interested in non-monogamy. And this could be someone who's like, you could be in non-monogamy for a long time and you want to think, like, for example, right, when I felt that jealousy I was talking about earlier, right, so many years deep, I didn't realize how many of the things that jealousy was connected to were also connected to the paradigm of mononormativity, right? But at the time, I hadn't thought about it enough to write a book yet or do a workshop, and the book didn't exist yet, right? But so like deep into non-monogamy, but also for people who are newer to non-monogamy and are thinking about how are we going to do this, right? We're talking about thinking about relationships in a completely different way from what we have always known, right? Like if we grew up in the West, chances are that we grew up in a world that reflected back monogamy at every turn. So for the non-monogamous folks of all kinds, of course, right? But then also some of the stuff, I use a little bit of my background in therapy to just like do a little bit of like asking questions about how I feel about relationships, right? Also, like if you're an ally to anyone in our community, or if you're a family member and you want to understand, this is a really great, and it's not too long. So it's like kind of a small bite of like, because when people are like, I just don't get this non-monogamy thing, right? And it's like, here, read this. It's like a resource for them. And then I think the people that I would also love to read it are professionals. Nothing would make me happier. Like as a therapist, if I wish that I didn't have so many people who come to work with me after having experienced harm from therapists who say that they're either non-monogamy aware or that they can work with anyone. And, whether it's because they spent their whole therapy session or sessions explaining or defending their relationships, or I've had people literally say that their therapist said, well, if one is like, you have to break up with one of your partners, otherwise I have to stop doing work with you. But another one was, oh yeah, well, definitely if you were monogamous, I don't think you would be having any of these mental health struggles. So all of a sudden I'm working with people who are dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And now also the trauma of working with people who just don't get it. And I have so much respect for not getting it. It's taken me years and years. I'm 20 plus years deep, and some days I wonder if I even get it, right? But if you're going to work with people and you're going to say that you have capacity to work with people, if you've never thought about what we have to do in order to practice these kinds of relationships, I would love for like supporting people to read this.
I think that really resonates with me because with the work that I do from a coaching perspective, since I'm a certified coach, not a therapist, as you can imagine, I can't even tell you how many times people have come to me after they have gone to couples counseling or therapy. And just like you said, to validate for you and our listeners, that's exactly what happens often is they tell me, look, I had to train my therapist or my counselor explaining what polyamory or consensual non-monogamy was. That was like the first 5 sessions. And then I felt like I was being made wrong. Like the problem with you is the
Yeah.
polyamory. If you just stop that, everything will be better. Like they
Oh,
were
yeah.
actually told that, And so I really
Genuinely.
appreciate the work that you did in writing this book. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there was it was definitely a labor of all kinds of things, but definitely a lot of love went into it for
Yeah,
sure.
I bet. I bet. And that brings me to my next question. Like, I have written a book and I know how challenging it can be from battling the imposter syndrome for many folks and just the hours and putting your thoughts on paper in a cohesive manner and just the time that it takes. So I'd love to ask, what was one of the most rewarding things about writing the book and one of the most challenging things?
Wow. I think one of the most rewarding things, I mean, it's not out yet, right? So it's like maybe it's going to be that I'm going to become like an international sensation. Maybe that'll be the most rewarding thing. But for now, I think like doing the thing, I start a lot of projects, again, like classic ADHD stuff, right? Now that I know that that's not just me, not just a procrastinator but it's also kind of wired in a little bit. I think I've started so many creative projects over the years that, for whatever reason don't get finished or there's no accountability coming from anyone else. Like, did I get the first draft in a week late? You freaking bet. But I still got it in.
Hmm.
And I think there's something for me about the power in like, oh, I can do that. Like I can do the thing. I can sit down and get it done. And I got it done. And there's like, again, I mentioned that I audio recorded my own audio book, which was kind
I
of
did as
wild.
well, by the way. It was wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like dreaming of someone, my voice is very strong. Like my written, my friends who know me have always said like you think like you talk like you write, like it's all very similar. And so I always like imagine someone else trying to tell my jokes for me, or like eating my voice, So I get that you
Mhm.
would have done that as well. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
loved it actually. Yeah.
yeah,
And
it was
the
a lot
quick
of fun.
aside, I don't know if you had this experience. I procrastinated doing it for like a year and a half because I had in my head it was gonna be this really big project, And when I actually had a cancellation of something on a Friday, and I was like, you know what? This is the day I'm gonna record it, and I'm just not gonna stop this weekend until it's done. And my book is
Wow.
relatively short, and I was done in 5 hours in my closet upstairs. And I was like, I
Oh my
procrastinated a year and
God.
a half for 5 hours of reading this book. What was I thinking?
That's wild. Yeah, similarly, I had a word count. I think that was one of the biggest challenges. Not my answer to your question, but like
Yeah.
having a word count because I could have gone on for days, right?
Oh,
But
yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, like
Mhm.
like having to keep it under a certain amount of words. But what was
Mm.
fascinating is what you just said. So the partner that I live with is also an audio technician and a music producer. And so he literally he has like a little mini, like an office in his office. It's almost like a closet. Let's call it a large closet.
Sure.
He had like, I have photos of this. There's like, when I like release the book more publicly, like I'm going to send some of these photos out into the world of like blankets draped on a futon up against the wall on like a
Yep.
little mini, like a proper mic. But the problem is we live on a pretty busy street. So what we
Oh.
realized is there's constantly this like whooshing sound of vehicles. So what we
Oh.
had to do is we did it all in a weekend, but we had to do it super late at night so there were no cars or trucks on the road.
Uh-huh.
So it was like a pretty funny experience, but very similar to what you're describing, just like hunkering down. But if I didn't have someone else telling me like, Yella, we're gonna do this, get on it, I
Mm.
probably would have waited 2 years as well.
Right, right. Yeah, and similar, a funny story is my sound engineer, Troy, is a magician. He's absolutely amazing. He's been working with me almost since the beginning of this podcast.
Oh.
And when, I've been living in this body my whole life, so some things I just take for granted. I was like, hey, Troy, how's it going working on the audio for the book? He's like, it's going good, but my God, your fucking stomach, it keeps grumbling.
Oh my God, that's
Because
so
I just take it for
funny.
granted that my stomach just makes noises, but the mic was picking it all up. So he had to play
That's
with
a
the sound to get it out.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah,
So
that's
funny. Yeah.
what are
Yeah. And my partners will make
and
fun of the sounds of my stomach as well, because it's just, I have a grumbly stomach, but I just
yeah,
didn't even
no,
think about it when I was reading, and I can't really stop it. It's not necessarily about
of
hunger. It's like
course.
digestion sounds.
I totally get it. I totally get it. And
Yeah.
I can answer because it was very clear to me. The part about what was the hardest part about
Oh,
writing this
yeah.
book was not the writing it, or the hardest part, I think, of the process for me is having my thoughts and words being filtered through multiple other people's editing.
Mm.
So, like, for example, I am a firm believer in the Oxford comma. That is not in the writing style of the publishing house.
Ah.
So even when I was reading back my own writing, it felt like almost like an AI generated version of how I know myself. So it was this thing of like, oh, interesting. It's like they didn't squash my ideas. They were wonderful. Like, it's not about them doing anything wrong. And like what an opportunity I've had. But I think that piece of like it's not exactly how I would have written it. And as someone who's just so damn like connected to like this is my meanness, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was something like an interesting process of letting go as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm so excited for you. And and I'd love to just ask, is there what would you say are some of the goals of that book, that project? Like, what do you hope people get from it?
I think recognizing what it is to like what social paradigms are about. Like understanding, right? Like because understanding what social paradigms are about in terms of like I'm saying paradigm, right? When we talk about a paradigm, it's just the way things are, right? I don't think about when I go into a store and I, have a chocolate bar and then I bring it to the cash and then the clerk tells me how much and then I hand the money, right? That's all within the paradigm of capitalism and how we use money as part of our exchange. I don't think about it. It's just what is, right? Mononormativity or the parasocial paradigm of monogamy is exactly the same way. I wouldn't have thought twice about seeing a love triangle on TV, or I wouldn't, is there a plus one to the wedding, right? And I give these different examples throughout the book of like the ways that it sort of plays out in our dynamics, but also for folks who are navigating non-monogamy, the work of deconstructing that paradigm, right? Like the feeling of like, oh my God, what if they fall in love with someone else and leave me? Is that a fear just in and of itself? Maybe there's some insecurity, sure, but also, isn't that exactly what happens in mononormativity? In the monogamous paradigm, if I fall in love with someone else, I mean, there's two options. I'm going to cheat or I'm going to leave.
Right.
And so recognizing that a lot of the shit that we carry, the baggage that we carry into non-monogamy with us is stuff that we were raised to just take for granted as the status quo. So hoping that people can understand or like get a sense of like the uphill battle that we're all sort of waging or climbing. I may have just mixed a few metaphors there, but the way that we're all kind of like the uphill climb to, practicing non-monogamy in effective and healthy ways, but also to have some compassion for ourselves and our loved ones, to not just be judgy bitches to ourselves and each other because we are doing this uphill thing that is defying a paradigm.
Yeah, that's
that felt
beautiful.
really good. That felt very catchphrasy. I like heard myself. I didn't plan that.
Well done. No, I thought that was beautiful. Yeah. So way to lean into your own intuition. So I'm just really appreciate the conversation, Marla. So before we start to wrap up, is there any question I didn't ask you or any message that you would like to leave with our listeners?
relationships are hard. Relationships are hard, but hard doesn't equal bad. And I think that's the thing, is like our society, which is, it's colonialism, keep calm, carry on, which we see everywhere, under like the British ideology. And this keep calm and carry on is like, it's so avoidant. Don't have an argument. Don't get upset. Don't have big feelings. Like, don't let them know what's going on. Don't be vulnerable. Protect yourself, right? Don't get me wrong. Absolutely. If we need to protect ourselves and stay safe, I'm here for that, right? Like, that's not what I'm saying not to do. But I think that recognizing that, like, it's not just about non-monogamy is hard. All relationships, if we are going to participate in relationships with care and consideration and consciousness and building with intention, right? Then they're all going to be hard. And it's okay to lean into the challenges. Like, it's okay. Hard doesn't sometimes hard is bad, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't automatically equal bad.
Yeah. Awesome. Beautiful message. Thank you for sharing that and sharing your heart and your insights and your wisdom here with us. And of course, your work with your book, Non-Monogamy and Defying a Paradigm. So where can folks learn more about you and your work and find the book?
Everything is, if it's not already there, it will be like imminently on my website. So polyammarla.com. It's like polyamory, but with a Marla. So polyammarla.com, but also on socials. So you can find me sort of like screaming on my soapbox in the ether, on Instagram at polyammarla, on TikTok at polyammarla, on YouTube, which I'm slowly crawling toward. I was designed for long form, as you've probably figured out by now. I just have to do the thing. There's just a lot of things thinging, but yeah. And so the book is available through Thornapple Presses. Like, everything is available for pre-order right now. So on the website for Thornapple Press, but that's directly linked on my website. I believe all the places like Amazon has it, but I'm not here to promote them by any means. There are other cool, smaller, local places that you can probably find it as well. So if you look on the website.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you again so much for reaching out, for coming here on Love Without Boundaries to share about your story, your history, and this beautiful work that you put together. And thank you, of course, for all the work that you're doing for our larger community. And yeah, just a really great conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really, truly been a pleasure. Like, very, very easy to chat with you. So thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoy the Loving Without Boundaries podcast, I know you'll also love the Open Nesters podcast with my friends Tessa and Amir, a poly couple with 3 adult kids, together for 36 years and open almost 25 of those. The Open Nesters podcast not only explores open relating, but opening to our best act of life. Act 3, where adult kids are getting ready to leave the nest and we get to reimagine life on our terms. Visit theopennesters.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Yours in the opening.